Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Commander video. This time I want to talk about 10 common sense reprints. People talk about cards that should get reprinted all the time that are $50, that are $100, and the whole purpose behind wanting those reprints is that it will make those cards more accessible. And I agree, I think cards that are ridiculously expensive that have gone without a reprint for a long time deserve to be reprinted, but so do the little cards that fall through the cracks. People forget about these. They're maybe not that expensive, most of these are under $10, but it's because they haven't been reprinted that they're still going to have some kind of value. And they're possibly going to be more difficult to find. We've all run into that situation. You go and you try to build a deck, only to have some random card you didn't anticipate being hard to find become harder and harder to find. And the criteria for this, I wanted to go back over 10 years ago. Obviously, I could go to a set that was just printed last year, talk about a card that deserves to be reprinted, but that would be T-Ball. So I aimed for right around New Phyrexia, Scars of Mirrodin, Shards of Alara, Zendikar, World Wake, sets with plenty of cards that still haven't been reprinted. And it's not just rares, it's not just mythics. We have some commons here too. The first one is Torpororp from New Phyrexia. Talked about this card quite frequently because of the new Elish Norn having a very similar ability. It is very strong. I remember having several headaches having to go up against this card, but it's not quite as much of a presence as it used to be. Still a worthwhile reprint if Wizards of the Coast they want to experiment. Maybe throw this back into a standard legal set, because it's totally not going to break any format. Just a solid 2-mana artifact. It's one of the only cards that does this still. So I would like to see it get the reprint treatment. The next card is Walking Atlas from World Wake. This is a common, and it's a common that I think people take for granted, but there are a lot of land strategies that care about this card. It's super flexible, a colorless way of putting a land from our hand onto the battlefield. There are combos with this as well, so it is desirable in that aspect. Again, it doesn't have to be super expensive to warrant a reprint. I think just a solid card like this deserves to see a reprint in any kind of slot where you would reprint a common. Totally something you could throw into a precon. We've seen this ability, but it's been on a green creature, so colorless might be too powerful, but still, I think it deserves a reprint. Next, we have Supine Priest, another one from New Phyrexia, and another common. But this is a really good white common. It's also a cleric, so it has a creature type going for it. But of course, the Soul Sister adjacent abilities, where you can gain some life, you can force your opponents to lose life off of creatures entering the battlefield, is the appeal. This is one of those cards that you thought would probably receive a reprint by now, seeing as it still is incredibly popular to play in Commander. But no, that's not the case. It's another common sense one. Again, it's not super difficult to find, like Walking Atlas, but for what it does, it is mechanically important for certain strategies. Being able to slowly drain life or being able to slowly gain life. That's what a lot of strategies are about in this format. Next, we have yet another common and another card from New Phyrexia. It's Getaxian Probe. This one is easier to justify why it hasn't been reprinted. It's been banned in so many different formats. The only places where it's legal, we're talking about Commander, and also I think it's restricted in Vintage. It's just such a great card. It's another one that, again, this has been around for a long time. Way before the mass bannings, you could see this card being reprinted, at least in some kind of master set. To not receive a reprint in any of those, they totally could have made this an uncommon and upgraded that rarity. It's another one of those cards that's just such a common sense reprint of a good card that people know about this. They know that it's been good for a long time. It would be such a great one to just throw into any kind of precon as well. Next, we have Thada Aquisitor. I believe the set symbol is World Wake. There's something about the set symbols for World Wake and Zendikar where they're easy to confuse, but this looks like World Wake to me. A really underrated creature in Commander, and I think you can justify a reprint if you look at a lot of the other Commander cards that have been printed in the past couple years. It's a continuation of things that we got with Gonti, Lord of Luxury, where it's about stealing your opponent's cards. It's about stealing specific types of permanents, and this one lets you steal artifacts, which in Commander we have a ton to choose from. At the bare minimum, you can expect something like a Soul Ring. So there's a lot of value here, and great evasion with that Island Walk makes it easy to hit actual artifact decks. It's got the good creature types too, Merfolk and Rogue, very playable if you care about those tribes. Next, we have Life's Finale, another card from New Phyrexia. This time it's a rare. Not the most premium of board wipes when you talk about the value for the mana that you're putting into it. Of course, anything more than 4 mana, then you start to ask, well, where's the extra value? Well, Life's Finale, it helps if you don't just view it as a board wipe. That's a huge bonus. The cool thing about it is that you're able to set up your opponent's graveyards. Set it up in a way that you can take advantage of it afterwards. This card has often been included in commander decks such as the Mimeoplasm because of your ability to then steal those creatures that you put in your opponent's graveyards. What's really cool is that you can use this to hurt non-graveyard decks by getting their 3 best creatures from their library, forcing them to say goodbye, and they're likely not going to have those creatures on the field. It's one of those cards that you could so easily see in a precon deck, because usually in precon decks we don't get the absolute best removal. We get something that's a little overcosted. We get 5 mana board wipes, 6 mana board wipes, and this would fit right in. But again, keep in mind, it is more than just a board wipe. It is very strategic. It allows you to set up your plays and how you can hurt your opponents. We talked about ways of stealing with Thada Adel. View this as another tool to help you steal your opponent's creatures. Next, we have Kalitas, Bloodchief of Get from Zendikar. Now, it's by far the worst Kalitas, however, I still think, again, when we're talking about taking from your opponent something and making it your own, Bloodchief of Get is another one of those cards. The one main knock against it is that it is a whopping 7 mana, and then you need haste and 3 more black mana, which means you're going to have to wait at least a turn to really take advantage of this. But once you are able to, it's great removal on a creature's activated ability. You put a black vampire creature token onto the battlefield and its power is equal to that creature's power, and its toughness is equal to that creature's toughness. Of course, I wouldn't play this if it didn't have that kind of upside, but because it does, it will make that mana at least somewhat worth it. More of a common sense reprint than anything. It's not something that I think people are waiting for that opportunity to pick one up. It's more or less that we've had some vampire precons. This is such an easy card to justify for any kind of precon deck, or any sort of return to Zendikar. We've been there a few times already. I don't know how excited people would be to return, but this is something that you could see as part of a supplemental product for another return to Zendikar. Next, we have Vicious Shadows from Shards of Alara. This card is super underrated. I know it's an expensive red enchantment. It's not what you think of when you think of ways of winning in red, but this card is amazing, and I've played it for so long. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, you may have Vicious Shadows deal damage to target player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. So you're going after the great card advantage decks. That is one half of what makes strong commander decks strong, is that they're constantly able to replenish their hand, which will help them play more spells in the following turns. Vicious Shadows will take advantage of your aristocrat strategy. Anything like a Korvald, where you're constantly sacrificing creatures in red, you'll be able to fully take advantage of this and deal a ton of damage to those opponents. It's a bit more old school now, I have to admit. I played this primarily with Prosh Skyraider of Care because of how easy it was to sacrifice several creatures at once. It was the kind of card that came out of nowhere, in a strategy where people were probably more likely to expect a Craterhoof Behemoth as a win con. Throwing this out there for 7 mana, it's not exactly recognized as the ultimate threat that it should be. Next we have Melira Silvok, Outcast. This is such a great value card, and especially if you care about combos, you can totally take advantage of combos. This is one of those cards that I think is waiting for the right opportunity to shine, and it hasn't been reprinted, so you know that's a ticking time bomb for value. It's one of those cards you could totally see on the market watch. Super cheap, flexible, across different formats, and you better believe you could take advantage of her in Commander. The last card today is Prince of Thralls from Shards of Alara. This one went up over the summer and going into the fall of 2022, and for a good reason. It's absolutely ridiculous. This 8-mana Grixis Demon says whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into a graveyard, put that card into play under your control unless that opponent pays 3 life. So you can expect to at least drain them of some life. Hasn't been reprinted before. I didn't even know this card existed before the summer, but now it is a pretty pricey card. Not exactly something that I think people are going to be rushing to add to their decks at its current price point. But oh boy, do I want to play with it. It's every bit the type of brutal card in Grixis colors that I would want to play. So that's going to do it for these 10 common sense reprints. Let me know what you think of them in the comment section below, and feel free to leave the names of some cards that you think are common sense reprint candidates. Commander Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.